Please give generously to Revolution Radio. Okay, I want to go on here and a little bit different show this week. I talk about conspiracies, down the rabbit hole. Is Dwight Lilly a conspiracy theory nutcase? Should he be locked up in some insane asylum? Does he have some ulterior motive that he keeps bringing up these esoteric topics that just don't seem to fit the normal narrative of a person in 2019? Well, to begin with, I don't know what a normal narrative is. I've talked so many times about propaganda, the fact that we are victims, every one of us, from within the womb forward into this life, from brainwashing, propaganda brought upon by our parents, by those around us, all the way through the public school systems or the private school systems, right on through college, or right on to the work world, right into relationships, and on marching towards our eventual physical demise here. And that is what is running us, the propaganda, the narrative, rather than us being free thinkers, self-actualizing consciousness in action. Because in reality, that's what we are. We are pure consciousness having taken on an aspect of itself in this physical life. So, are people equal? One of the themes I have of my local radio show is there equality under the law? And it's a real question here in America, where I'm broadcasting from, and I'm assuming it's the same in other countries around the world, that does everybody have an equal shot at life, at the system? If you happen to be called upon the carpet, so to speak, over some legal wranglings, are you in your present station of life going to receive equal treatment under the law as to somebody else of maybe a higher social status, somebody connected? And quite frankly, here in the United States is the golden rule applies. He who has the gold, he who has the power rules. So there's two sets of standards. There's one for them, and there's one for the rest of us. Now, even the rest of us can be broken down into different strata. It can be, are you very poor? Are you at the bottom of the economic ladder? Are you relegated to sleeping on a park bench or out in the open because you don't have the means to provide for your own housing? Are you dependent upon the system itself, whether it be begging, stealing, charity, public assistance through your government, whatever, for your very survival? The question a person has to make to themselves, ask of themselves, I should say, is how did I get to this station? Not just accepting. Now, just getting to the question is extremely difficult, because if you've been programmed and brainwashed, as everybody has, there's going to have to become an awakening moment in your life, that aha moment where you take a step back and say, wait a minute, I really am in this matrix that Dwight talks about in his show. I'm living in this hologram existence that is totally controlled, and yet I think I have control over my life. Now, when we get into this, and I want to speak here again about this equality situation, I've long been suspicious, and I'll tell you why, about equal outcome. Well, for one, the amount of research I've done on the topic. Number two, the number of phone calls that I receive locally from people, because I am somewhat of a radio host personality here in Southern Nevada, here in the United States. So I have people contacting me believing that maybe Dwight can help, or does Dwight know about what's going on here? There's a guy that is by the name of Ray the Flagman. His name is Ray Bazinski, I believe is how he spells his last name, but or pronounce it. But he goes by Ray the Flagman, and Ray is quite the patriot. He goes out on the streets every day with a sandwich board of the United States Bill of Rights and a flag. trying to get across the point where we have to defend our rights under the Constitution, under the Bill of Rights, or they'll be taken away from us. And quite frankly, it's an ongoing process right now, and a question mark of whether we will, in the United States, be able to hold on to our freedom, the liberty that we all embrace, and our Bill of Rights. I'm not going to go into that. That's a political topic I would share with you another day. But as I start listening to people, and Ray also happens to attend the Nye County, Nevada courthouse, district courthouse, every day during the week, and sits in and listens to cases. And he reports, he calls into my radio show virtually every day and reports about what's going on in the courthouse and the abuses that people are confronted with. And it keeps coming up that people of means are not treated the same as the poor people or the regular people. They just aren't. They have a special set of rules when it comes to the criminal justice system. But there's other areas of life that I've discovered too. I think I've mentioned it in the past. I like to visit graveyards. Yeah, I know, I'm kind of a ghoul, but I like to visit graveyards. And anyway, gotta adjust my headpiece here. How'd that thing get upside down? But anyway, I hope you can hear me. But anyway, I'm talking on a microphone combination headpiece right now because I still don't have the microphone hooked up here in the studio from when I reopened this up. But anyway, going on here. That I follow on YouTube, one of them, his name is Steve, and Steve goes out and he visits graveyards and films them on YouTube. But he goes in particular to graves of those famous people that have passed on, and then he'll talk a little bit about their movie career or their whatever is famous about them. You know, they could be an astronaut, they could be a famous artist, they could be a musician, what have you. And he tells a little bit about their life. It's just kind of intriguing because even though these people have passed on, they're not forgotten. At least to me, they're not forgotten. There's a saying that goes something like this. It goes like, you die twice. Yes, you die twice in this existence here. The first time you die is when you physically die. That's when you've taken your last breath physically. And the second time you die is the last time that anybody ever speaks your name. Yeah. So people going out and visiting graveyards and then filming a gravestone on YouTube, and showing the name of the person, the date of their birth, the date of their death, and telling a little bit about them if they have to have knowledge, that keeps that person, in a sense, connected and somewhat alive in this overall experience we are all sharing. I know it's probably strange to a lot of you out there listening, but it's something that I think about. But now here's the reason this long-winded, I get long-winded, don't I? Here's how this relates to what I want to talk about somewhat today. I noticed that famous people live a lot longer than you and I do. It's a fact. If you were to take a graph of people, now the Bureau of Vital Statistics, and those that do the number crunching of mortality in each country, because there's different countries in the world. You might be listening to me from a different country out there. Hold on one second, I gotta fix this. There, I fixed my headphones here. Sorry about that. They somehow got twisted around and was impossible to talk into the microphone. But now they're better. I don't know how that happened, but there must have been something set on them. But anyway, going on here. If you were to look at go to Find a Grave. It's a website, findagrave.com, I think it is, whatever, but you can do a search on the internet. Bring up Find a Grave, and it has listings of, you can go to cemeteries around the world, and if people have taken photos of graves, gravestones, or there's like people put in biographies of relatives and people. It's kind of fascinating. It's a historical search with a little bit of different perspective to it. But I started noticing by going there, I said, my God, all of these actors and politicians, mainly actors and actresses and people like that, politicians, famous people, how many of them live close to 100, over 100 years old, in their 90s, upper 80s, yet statistically, and I know statistics can have a funny way of lying to us, but the average person lives somewhere around 78 to 81, right in their years. I know there's some countries that have longer lifespans on average than what I just said. I think Japan, those of you listening to me from Japan probably know what it's like talking about. We live a lot longer than that on average here. But here in the United States, for example, I believe it's somewhere 78 to 79 years old. Now, of course, that's an average of all of the lives. People die in infants, they die in automobile accidents at a young age, but it's the average life expectancy. But anyway, let's move on here. I'm talking about the normal, Dwights, the normal Johns, the normal Marys, the normal Cynthias, whatever your names are. Us normal people, we generally make it to our upper 70s and into the 80s, and then we perish. But not these other people. And I notice that the names that I run across in Find a Grave, that if I look at the story, God, this person was into alcohol, they were into drugs, they lived the fast Hollywood or New York or Paris or London scene, the party scene. And for the rest of us, if we do that heavy drinking and partying and drugs, we statistically die from a disease associated with it, or the effects of it. So why am I seeing these people living to be in their 90s and 100? I'm talking not just a couple of years difference, but let's just say, settle on a figure, let's just say 80 years is a normal life expectancy. These people seem to have a normal life expectancy of somewhere in the upper 80s into the 90s. A good 12, 15, sometimes 20%, they live longer. Now, is it because they have better health care? Is it because they are getting treatments that you and I don't have available to us, either through our national health plans, like a lot of countries have a national plan? But does that plan evenly apply? Now, if I'm living in Germany, for example, or England, or Sweden, and you guys out there listening, you can answer this question, because all I'm doing is bringing up these countries that I know they have national health plans. But, here's the big but, is everybody treated equally under them? Does somebody in government, some famous rich person, some movie star or musician, do they have this access to somewhat of a secret medical society that has those cures that the rest of us don't have, those treatments that the rest of us don't have? I suspect that they do have. And again, call me a conspiratist, but I believe there's an effort, and it's going to be an increasing effort, to decrease the population of the world. If they that have access to these treatments were to allow the rest of us to have access to these treatments, then obviously it would add years, decades to the lifespan of the average Joe. Even the people at the bottom of the economic rung, the people that are poor, that are on street corners, I know that they get access to health care, even though we don't have a national plan here in the United States. Everybody in the United States has health care. I know there's a debate that goes on about that, but we really do. We have a way of treating people in this country under Medicaid, Medicare, different state programs. People aren't being left out like the mainstream media would have you believe. You can get health care in the United States, but it's not the same, it's what I'm saying right here in this show, as the rich people. They have the access to something that you and I don't have. Now, I'm going to give you an example here. I found this article. This has kind of spurred me. It's from today. And here in the United States, you know, those of you, let me take a sip of water here. Those of you living here, or those of you aware of our system of government, know that we have a Supreme Court, the highest court of the land, made up of 9 justices of the Supreme Court. And people that are appointed to federal judgeships, and the Supreme Court happens to be in that area. They're lifetime appointments. If for instance, if you were appointed to a United States Federal District Court as a judge at age 30, you would not be removed from bench at all, you know, unless you were impeached in some way, did something illegally, for the rest of your life. It's a lifetime appointment. So people that are appointed to the United States Supreme Court, they can retire, and they do retire, because some of them, most of them, recognize that they've gotten on and they can't really function well. You know, it's a very privileged position to be in. It's a position of royalty, in a sense, to be in a Supreme Court, because it's one of the 3 pillars of our government. You have the executive branch, which is made up of the President of the United States and his staff and workings. Then you have the legislative branch, which is made up of the United States Congress, which is broken down into the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. And then you have the judiciary, the 3rd leg of our government. So these people, these 9 people, make up one, you know, the 3rd leg, and not one of these areas has precedence over the other, in a sense. The United States Supreme Court can, in a sense, legislate for the bench, even though they're not supposed to. They do on a regular basis. So it's a very important position. Well, there's a woman on there right now, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Okay, now Justice Ginsburg has been dealing with cancer for a long time. Now, I'm not talking about, you know, skin lesions on her face or something like that. One of the, you know, if I don't know, think that I could say there's a minor cancer, but some cancers are definitely more lethal than others and harder to treat. So I'm gonna read you this little article here. It says, the justice recently completed radiation treatment for a tumor on her pancreas. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg giving a lecture. Okay, that's a picture. I don't want to get in that. Okay. It says, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg underwent radiation therapy this month for a tumor on her pancreas, the Supreme Court announced on Friday. Ginsburg, 86 years old, had 3 weeks of radiation on an outpatient basis beginning August the 5th and finishing this week. The tumor was treated definitively, and there is no evidence of disease elsewhere in the body. Ginsburg will continue to have periodic blood tests and scans. No further treatment is needed at this time. Ginsburg has been treated for cancer, are you ready for this? Several times over the past 20 years. In other words, from the age of 66, again in the 60s, when cancer and heart disease take people out. This summer marked her 2nd round of treatment in less than a year. In December, are you ready for this? She had surgery for lung cancer. Doctors said that surgery was successful and there was no evidence of remaining cancer at that time. Now, what do I see strange about this? Lung cancer, pancreatic cancer are 2 of the cancers that you simply do not want to get. I mean, you don't want lung cancer. My sister died at the age of, I think she was 54 years old, in 10 months from diagnosis of lung cancer. It's a very lethal form of cancer, and yes, they can treat it. But generally with lung cancer, it gets into stage 4 which is where it's metastasized across your body, without most people ever recognizing the symptoms or doctors even knowing that it's in existence in a sense. So, pancreatic cancer, outside of rich people, I'm going to say this right now, that I read about in the news, and I've known people that have died of pancreatic cancer. I don't know one single person that I know of, and I know a lot of people that have had pancreatic cancer that have survived. Most of them have perished within a couple of years. But when you get into these elite classes of people, that's not true. Now, Steve Jobs, one of the founders of Apple Computer, he had pancreatic cancer for years. And what eventually killed him, according to the reports that I read, is that he had stopped the treatments that he was taking and had opted to try to cure his pancreatic cancer through natural means. Now, I don't know what he meant by natural means, holistic health, health treatments of some type. I don't know. But when he stopped taking the treatments that he had been taking, he died. Now, those of you that can recall Steve Jobs over the years, before he died, a few years before he died, he was very thin, very emaciated looking, because the pancreatic cancer does affect your diet, your how you digest foods, and so that whole part of your system, and so it disrupts. But he was alive. Now, again, he stopped the treatment. So, what treatment? What treatment did he stop? What was he getting at the, hospitals and doctors' offices and through the oncologist? What was he receiving that you and I would have available to us? Because if we were, there's nothing super about Ginsburg or Steve Jobs or any of these other Hollywood actors or industrialists or rich people that live these long lives and surviving for years, decades, on diseases that you and I would perish from in just a matter of months or a year or so. And I'm not just saying this. If you guys listening to the show, think about it. Stop back, do an inventory of the people you've known in your lives that have died of cancer or heart disease or any other type of disease that you can think of. Think about it. Do an inventory. Your relatives, people that you've worked with, your friends, neighbors in the neighborhood, people that go to a religious service that you happen to attend, or in a club that you happen to belong to, the ones that came down with cancer or serious heart disease or diabetes or many of the diseases out there that people come down with, how long do they live? Think about it, because I can only tell you from my experience, but I've been around, that it's when I hear of somebody having cancer, for example, or type A or type B diabetes, that they're getting into the later stages of it, they end up in dialysis and they pass away.